Okay. Sports are and always have been a large part of human culture. Countless people around the world either play sports or watch live sports. While these televised events are held with harmless intentions, uh, they can serve as conduits for expressing outrage against social and political issues. This is especially the case in the U.S., where politics and sports are especially related. It's also especially the case in the U.S. because of the sheer number of people involved. According to research expert David Lang, 154.4 million people in the U.S. watch live sports at least once per month. This can become a problem when this outrage against injustice fuels the already present anger and tribalistic tendencies of sports fans. The situation becomes more complex when teams and players align themselves with political viewpoints and take action themselves, which causes them to become a symbol for their cause, and fans will treat them as such, whether they agree or disagree with them. Because of this, the line between a sports game and a protest has become blurred, and the country has become more divided. While the results of sports figures speaking out can be positive, such as Muhammad Ali's protest of the Vietnam War, they ultimately, most of them, end up damaging the nation's unity. The mixture of sports and political issues involves Americans in heated, politically charged conflicts, which cause much civil unrest. Americans who would not normally be involved in such hateful engagements are agitated when politics enter the realm of sports. Such as the separation of church and state, the same should be said about sports and politics. In a quote by the famous author George Orwell, "It is possible to play simply for the fun and exercise, but as soon as you feel that you and some larger unit will be disgraced, if you lose, the most savage combative instincts are aroused." This quote speaks to the inherently, as I previously mentioned, the inherently divisive and tribalistic nature of sports, which can be enhanced when politics are added. From the coliseums to stadiums, sports and politics have often intersected throughout history. One such example was the Nico Revolt of Constantinople in the year 532 AD. The revolt began when two chariot drivers stopped the race and demanded that Emperor Justinian pardon two men sentenced to death. When Justinian refused, the ensuing conflict resulted in 30,000 deaths. While this revolt obviously had a much more severe outcome than any comparable modern-day event, the underlying cause of the tragedy is eerily familiar. To provide some background into this event, in the Byzantine Empire, chariot racing was divided into four teams: the red team, the blue team, the green team, and the white team. The two men sentenced to death were members of these teams, and other members of these teams were very angered by them being put to death. This is what motivated them to go to the Colosseum and riot when Justinian refused the two chariot drivers' requests. This example has the same elements of tribalism and group identity politics we see today. A more local and recent example was when NFL player Colin Kaepernick knelt during the national anthem during a football game. This caused an incredible amount of controversy in America. Those who opposed him accused him of disrespecting the flag, and those who supported him said that his kneeling was a necessary protest against racial injustice. The situation was exacerbated when former President Donald Trump commented on the protest by saying that players who knelt, quote, maybe shouldn't be in the country, which inversely angered the left and emboldened the right. Regardless of the positivity that may have come from this event, it ultimately only divided America further. As I previously mentioned, a positive example of this occurrence is when Muhammad Ali protested the Vietnam War. He did this by refusing to be drafted, saying that to fight would be against his own personal beliefs with this statement. And this statement encouraged the anti-war movement, and he was one of the first major celebrities to speak out against the war, which indirectly caused its end. In order to help repair our damaged unity, we can't continue to let politics enter the field of sports. This quote by Theodore Roosevelt I feel is very relevant because It's important to realize that the people that in the sports world that do these protests have good intentions, but perhaps they do not realize the full scope and the future consequences of their actions, because in many cases it can actually reverse progress. In the same way the Supreme Court once separated church and state, sports organizations need to refrain from political outbursts and prohibit their players from doing so during games. Two limitations to this. Number one, it could actually cause more protests, because number two, it could be interpreted as limiting free speech, which is incorrect, because if my suggestion were to be implemented, players would not be prohibited from using social media or using any other kind of platform to protest, just not during games. This would ease tensions and make sports a source of unity instead of division.
Question number one. What information did you need before you began your research, and how did that information shape your research?
I needed to know just the scope and severity and the urgency of this problem, and I found that in the article titled "The Understudied Nexus of Sports and Politics" by Andrew Miner and Thomas Gift. Because it analyzed not just in America, just the global implications of this.
Okay. And then second question, how did you use the conclusions and questions of others to advance your own research?
I used the conclusions of others to, again, figure out the scale of the problem, and I discovered that the scale was much bigger than I previously thought.